Today's Gemara in Rosh HaShanah Daf Tes. All the learning for this week has been generously sponsored as a chos for myself, the entire Chabura. As we forge into the second week of Maseches Rosh HaShanah, how fast time flies. We shall continue with the same vigor, geschmack, clarity, clear, chazaras as always. All the new subscribers, all the new listeners, we welcome you and we continue to keep on learning. Don't fall out 1 week in. Hopefully everyone is finally getting a hang of it. For those who've been with us at the beginning, we all should continue giving chizik to each other and being able to learn together. Of course, all the learning should be as chashira for Chaim and Devar Shemirim Basri is a good Lashan Lesbas Shana Makal Lord Chaim and Devar Shendel. Let's get to Bas Devar Shendel. Hopefully, we can share good news with all those who need shidduchim soon. As well as the chus for Hashem Shal Yosef and Yafrei Del Izvela Bas Leah Saretel Men Vega Chaim and Sar Som Simon Ezel Sar Bas Kanan Del Tabasim As Chaysa Yisel Mendel as Vert Shalei Shem As Nabim Shavik Shechana Shmo Ben Til Dim Chan Rezo Chai Basina Din Ein Bashin Mendel Sviv Megiron Mechleson Is Hu Rev Gas Hashem Tal Sim Mechlester Besoich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on the bottom of Ches Amid Bees. We actually pulled up a that short. We didn't really explain fully the last line. So let's just speak that out before we get into the new Gemara. We're in the middle of a discussion. When does Yovel begin? Does Yovel begin on Rosh HaShanah? Or does Yovel begin on Yom Kippur, the 1st of Tishrei or the 10th of Tishrei? And the problem was that we had a discrepancy in two psukim, that by Yom Kippurim, as the Gemara said 3 lines before the white lines, Tavir Shofar, that in Yom Kippur we blow the Shofar. Then there was a passage that said on the 50th year, it is holy. And we explained that the first opinion of Yisrael ben Breika held that from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur, it's like limbo, it's party world, like we said, that they don't work, the servants don't work for their masters, but they don't go home free. They're oichlin v'shayis, they sit and they eat and they rejoice, and then Yom Kippur, Bezdin blows the shofar and they go free. So that was the first opinion, that Yovel ostensibly begins on Yom Kippur. Comes on the Rabbanan say no, that it begins on Rosh Hashanah. If it begins on Rosh Hashanah, what's Uktashim and Shnas Chamishim Shana? Answers the Gemara. We're now 5 lines from the bottom. Excuse me. V'Rabbanan shanim atam mekadesh v'yatam mekadesh chadashim. What does that mean? We have to see one Rashi. Rashi teaches us shanim atam mekadesh kishashana yovel nechneses mitzvah al bezin loimer mikudesh lashana. There's a special halach when Yovel begins that Bezdin gets up and says mikudeshes. This year is holy, and that's not true on Rosh Chodesh. And each and every month, Bezdin doesn't have the same chiyuv to get up and proclaim it holy like they have to do in the year. And that's what the Rabbanan do with the pasuk of Ukadashtem, to make the 50th year holy, a special din on Bezdin. Before we continue into the new Gemara of Atanya Idach, just to make one correction from yesterday, I think Ramosha, I'm not sure, I was sent over his comment from YouTube that I said yesterday, and I'm not sure how, because I think I even read the Rashi in Amud Aleph, that the animals give birth. I said 6 months. I have absolutely no clue where I got that from, because Rashi says Chamisha Chadashim. It's a 5-month time period, so I appreciate the comment. I'm sure everyone else realized it on their own, that it's a 5-month time frame for the animals to give birth. Let's see the Gemara. Tanya Idach, we learned in a brayso, over 4 lines from the bottom. Ches Amid Beis. Yovel Hi, what does the pasuk mean when it says it is Yovel Matam Leimer? And today we could call it Yovel Day. It's going to be a whole day about the different halachas about Yovel. Matam Leimer, what does the pasuk mean? It says the 50th year is holy. Yochel, I would think, is shame. It's just like it starts off being holy and it continues into the 50th year, like we saw. It goes into Yom Kippur for 10 days. There's an element of holiness. You would think that so too it goes at the end, that at the end of the Yovel year it also extends for 10 days. And don't ask a question Titama from the wordage of bitmiyah, of wonderment, but don't ask. We always find such a concept, as we'll see in a few moments, that we always add on from the mundane onto the holy. We always add on Tosefes Shabbos, Tosefes Yom Kippur, as we'll see. There's always an additional added on. That's what you would think. Talmud Leimar says the Torah Yovel Hi. It is Yovel. Shnas Chamishim Shana HaChamishim Ata Mekadesh V'Ata Mekadesh Shnas Chamishim V'Achad. That the Yovel year only goes year 50 and does not go into year 51. So we just had that according to Rabbi Shmuel ben Breika, there was a Hava Mina that it would extend, just like it goes at the beginning of the Yovel year from Rosh HaShanah till Yom Kippur, like we just spoke out. Those 10 days that the servants are free, but they party, but they don't go home. Those 10 days of Simcha. So you would think that there's also an extra 10 days at the end of Yovel. That's the Hava Mina. Says the Torah, no. Yovel it is Yovel the year 50 and not into year 51. But I asked the Gemara as we go over to Daf Tesam and Aleph today's Daf, what do the Rabbanan do? Because according to the Rabbanan, there was never such a Hava Mina. Because according to the Rabbanan, they did not use the Pasuk K'dash to teach us that there's an additional 10 days. They learned to teach us, like we saw a moment ago. Let's just actually highlight that for one more second. They learned to teach us, like we just said, right? We just said today that Shana at the Mekadesh v'yat the Mekadesh Chadashim. So according to the Rabbanan, what do they need the actual Yovel Hi for? Says the Gemara, Daf Tesam and Aleph Rabbanan, Shnas Chamishim atamayna v'yat amayna Shnas Chamisha v'echas. What do they need that din for? Lafukim with Rabbi Yehuda, totally different halacha. Damar Rabbi Yehuda held Shnas Chamishim Rav Yehuda held that year 50 is year 50 and year 1. That it's a 50-year cycle, 49 years. Year number 50 is Yovel, and it's also the first year of the new cycle, meaning it's really a 49-year cycle. Kamash Malan hold the Rabbanan Deloi. The Rabbanan no, that it's a full 50-year cycle. You have 49 years. Year 50 is Yovel, and then the next year is year 1, the first year of the counting. So the Rabbanan need actually Yovel, it is Yovel. And it's not double counting, not like Rav Yehuda, and that wraps up the machlekes in Rabbanan and Rav Shmuel ben Yosh and Recham ben Breika. But within the brayso we just quoted a moment ago, we said that Moisifin Michal al Kodesh. We add on from the mundane onto the holy. Says the Gemara 4 lines down, Daf Tes. Or the Moisifin Michal al Kodesh. Where do we get this from that we add on? The Tanya we learned in the brayso. Says the brayso, a brayso that we've seen together numerous times. I don't know if we've seen it numerous times. Maybe not. Excuse me. Maybe we haven't seen it yet. Either way. It says in the Braisa that you should... you're not allowed, you have to rest. Tishbais, to rest from what? Charish, from plowing, from katzir, from reaping. Rav Akiva, we didn't have to teach me that during Shemitah you can't plow, you can't reap. Of course not. On Shemitah you can't do anything. Sharei, Kvar Nemer already says, already knew that. It says, on Shemitah do nothing. So why did the Torah reiterate? Charish, Tishbais, Ella, Charish, Erev, Shvius. What's charish? What's the forbiddance of plowing? We were adding on, not just during Shemitah, even a plowing on this 6th year that's going to benefit into the 7th year. And similarly, if you reap in the Shemitah year, that's going to extend into Motzai Shvius. That's forbidden. So the Gemara of Akiva teaches us about charish tishbais, not just during Shemitah. And this was relevant for the farmers already this year here in Eretz Yisrael, that certain malachas had to be were forbidden to drop earlier, and certain things are going to be forbidden at the end. Rav Yishmael Aimer, no. Ma charish rishos, av kotzer rishos. That just like plowing is optional, there's never an obligation to plow. I've got here. What does that mean? Yatik tzir oimer shu mitzvah. Rav Yishmael learned that's not referring to Shemitah. It's referring to Shabbos. Says Rav Yishmael, we need extra pasuk to teach me that what's forbidden on Shabbos? Plowing, reaping for no reason, for your own personal benefit. But if it's for a mitzvah, if it's for the carbon oimer, like Rashi points out, let's see that Rashi says. 1 second, where's the Rashi? Here it is. Although it's a bit further down in the Amid. Yotza, Kitzir Aimer Shu Mitzvah. It's actually about 8 lines from the end of the Amid. Shafilu, Matzah, Katzar, Mitzvah, Liksar. You have a mitzvah to cut down the new grain for the carbonite Vishchaluma Mikan. Shadoichas HaShabbos. That's what he learns out, that there's a special halacha that you would think, that it's only usher if it's a rishos, but if it's a mitzvah, then it's going to be excluded and it's going to be allowed. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Rabbi Yishmael, what do you do? Where does he know this concept that we add on from the mundane onto the holy? Because he learned the pasuk of Bachar Shavakater Tishbais. Teach me a different halacha, that if we have a reaping, a plowing of a mitzvah, that it's allowed on Shabbos. Answers the Gemara, he learns that from a different brayso. A very, very famous brayso. This is what we had in Gemara in Yuma, that you should afflict yourself on Yom Kippur. Betisha, Yachal Batisha, you would think on the 9th day you have to afflict yourself, you have to fast. You would think that you only have to fast once it gets dark. So how do we reconcile this? Is it the 9th or the 10th? We begin fasting during the day. Yom Kippur, that we have to start fasting a bit before Shkiyos when the fast begins. This teaches us that you have to add on. Yom Kippur doesn't just begin at nightfall. We have to add on and begin the fast a bit earlier. And says the Gemara, but you just told me that's when Yom Kippur begins. And you just told me the general rule that we add on to the holy from the mundane at the beginning of something. How do we know also at the end, the book end, also at the end you have to add on? How do we know this halach with every Shabbos? A very important halach. I believe we spoke about Gemara on Shabbos, and let's reiterate it right now. There's a day of Tosefes Shabbos, whether it's a Deraisa or whether it's a Rabbanan, it's Machlekes, but we have to add on to Shabbos. We can't wait till the moment is Shkiyah, boom, do Malacha till that second. There's a din, a mitzvah, you have to add on, as we're about to see right now. Shabbos is minayin. Tamalaymar tishbesu yamin toivim minayin. Tamalaymar shabbatchem. Ha keitzad, what does it all teach us? Kol makom sheyesh b'shvos. Whenever there's a din, there's a rule of cessation, of stopping, of not doing malacha. Moisifim michol al kodesh. We have to add on from the mundane onto the holy, a very, very important halach, and hopefully we'll all take a bit of chizik here. God forbid one should do malacha until Shkiyah on Erev Shabbos. You have to stop beforehand. How much before? So Ramesh and Tshuva, based on a Chai Adam, says perhaps 2-3 minutes. Okay, fine. So 2-3 minutes before. Maybe if someone needs to light candles, maybe perhaps for a mitzvah there'd be, but forget it. You have to stop malacha 2-3 minutes before Shkiyah, halavai, a bit earlier to get this mitzvah, as we're learning here, of Sifim Michol al Kodesh, both before and of course after Shabbos. Says the Gemara, that was Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael learned out that we use the pasuk b'char shavakasir tishbais, that we need that for a different halacha for a mitzvah. So we needed a new makar. We came on to Yom Kippur to teach me the makar of adding on from mundane onto holy. But according to Rabbi Kiva, he used the pasuk of Charshav Ketzer Tishbais. So what does Rabbi Kiva do with this pasuk? Rabbi Kiva asked the Gemara, this pasuk of Yom Kippur, V'tisha Mayavid Le. What does he do with the pasuk? Rabbi Kiva doesn't need a source to teach me to add on from the mundane to the holy, because he already learned that out from Charshav Ketzer Tishbais. So what does he do with the pasuk of Yom Kippur? Answers the Gemara, Mi Ba'iledechetani Rachia Barav Mi Difti, a very famous Mishnah, Brisa. You should afflict your soul. Betisha. Do we fast on the 9th? Very famous halacha. If you eat and drink on the 9th, the Torah considers it, as we move over to Daf Testament base, as we all know, there's a mitzvah tin on the Erev Yom Kippur, and then it's considered as if you fast that day. That's what Rabbi Kiva does with the pasuk V'nisem as nafshay seichem. Tanu Rabbanan. We just had a bit of a segue into the halachas of Ma'asifim Michol al Kodesh. Now we go back. What do we say today is? Today is Yovel Day. So let's go back to the Yovel for the rest of the ration of today's year. Tanu Rabbanan, Yovel leads, that's the Torah. It is Yovel year 50. It's Yovel, Aval Bishlei Shamtu. It's Yovel even if one did not abandon his fields. What's one halach of Yovel is all fields go back to the original owners. Aval Bishlei Tiku. It's Yovel even if you didn't blow a shofar. Yachal, I would think, it's even Yovel even if you didn't send the leaves back home. So we have a machlokes here. Which ingredient of Yovel is critical, crucial, and integral? There's 3 variables we're going to discuss. There's the halach of sending avodim slaves home. There's a halach of blowing shofar, and there's a halach of all fields going back home. So the first opinion says, Rabbi Yehuda, if you didn't send the fields back, it's okay. You didn't blow shofar, it's okay. But if you didn't send the servants home, that's not okay. Yovel, he teaches me that the servants have to go free. Now, where and why Rabbi Yehuda says this, of course, the Gemara will develop and elaborate on In a moment, Rav Yosi Aimer comes along. Rav Yosi and he argues. Yoivali, what does he learn? Afal bishlo shamtu, even though you didn't send the fields back home. Av bishlo shalchu, even though you didn't send the avodim back home, the slaves. Yachal av bishlo teko, you would think even if you didn't blow shayfar. Tamalay merhi. Period. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand. How do we know what is this machlokes? One pasuk includes, one pasuk excludes. How do you know which is which? How do you know which ones are integral and which ones are not? What's the machlokes? Where do we get this from? Where's the machlokes? You need to blow shofar. You need to send the slaves home. Where does this come from? How do we know what's what? Says the Gemara. It's possible that there could be a case that one would have a world that one did not send home any servants. However, it's impossible that there could be a world without blowing the shofar, meaning there will always be a way of getting a shofar. There will always be a year, a yovel, you'll have shofar. And since that is an absolute a necessity, that you can't have a year without it, that's the reason why it's critical, says Rebbe Yehuda. However, when it comes to slaves, maybe people won't listen, maybe they won't send their slaves home, maybe people won't have slaves, so that's not as integral. So again, Rav Yosi, I said that wrong. Rav Yosi says the reason why the shofar is integral, because that is something that's absolute, that will always be there. Davar acher, another reason why shofar is critical, Zumasur lebezdin, Zuinasur lebezdin. This is given over to Bezdin. So that which is given over to Bezdin, that which Bezdin is in control of, that is more critical. My davar acher, what's the second reason? Explains the Gemara. Maybe you'll ask, you just told me that it's possible to have a world where an Eved won't go free. Maybe you'll ask, really? Is that possible? There's not going to be one person that listens to Chachamim. There won't be one person in a far-fetched place that will send home a slave. How could that be? How can that be the defining factor? The thing that differentiates is that slaves, maybe no one will send their slave free. How could that be? Therefore, we answer a second answer. Zumasur lebezdin, zuinamasur lebezdin. Says the Gemara, great. You explain to me, Rabbi Yosi. El Rabbi Yehuda, my time. Where does Rabbi Yehuda get his halacha from? Rabbi Yehuda, let's go back. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda on the third line taught us that the sending the slaves home, that's the critical detail. Where does he get that from? Says the Gemara, the pasuk says you should proclaim durar, freedom in the land. Then the pasuk says yovel, it is yovel. And Rav Yehuda old mikra nejus lafanov. A pasuk is darshaned, is learned, is derived before v'loy fnei fanav, and it doesn't go 2 psukim back. And if we were to take a moment to look into the psukim over here, you'll see that what's going on over here, we could start with the no, excuse me, that's not the correct pasuk. Here's the pasuk. You make it holy. Cross them durar ba'aretz choyisha. Yovel iti lechem. Shavtem ish el achuzasai v'shal mishpachta teshuvu. So right there you see that what is the next detail in the pasuk, sending everyone home. So says Rav Yehuda, from the fact that the Torah says durar, freedom, yoiveli, it's yovel, send everyone home, that is the detail that is most critical. Whereas the other halachas in the psukim, which unfortunately we don't have in our Gemara in front of us, but the other halachas, the halachas of sending lands home, the halachas of blowing shofar, that's not immediately preceded in the pasuk. That is 2 psukim back, and therefore, since it's 2 psukim back, it's not as important. Says the Gemara, 1 second. The kuli alma durar lashon chayris. The assumption that you just made is that everyone agrees the word durar means chayris, means freedom. My mash, how do you know that? The Tanya, we learned in a brayso in durar ella lashon chayris. The word durar means freedom. Amar Rav Yehuda, ma lashon durar. Where does the word durar? How do we know that the word durar means freedom? That what kimedayer beyadara, as one who dwells, one who lives, dar, lives somewhere, and he carries his produce wherever he is, so he's a free man, he's not bound down to anywhere. So the word durar, freedom, comes from the fact that if you're dwelling somewhere, wherever you dwell and you have everything with you, then you're a free man. So that's how the word drar means freedom. So far we had two opinions. What are the critical ingredients by Yovel? Rav Yehuda said it's sending the slaves home because that's the item immediately preceding the pasuk. Rav Yosi said it is the blowing of the shofar. Says the Gemara, third opinion, or about 20 lines down. First word line is Bechol. Amar Rav Chia bar Rabba, Amar Rav Yochanan, Zu divrei Rav Yehuda v'Rav Yosi. Aval Chachamim ma'imrim, what do the Chachamim say? Shlosh dan ma'akavos by. Everything is important. All three psukim, where the Chacham, not three psukim, all three halachos, setting slaves free, sending the field home, and blowing shofar, they're all critical, they all have to be done. Why? Because the Chachamim hold that when you darshan a pasuk, it goes before and double before and afterwards. And therefore, says the Chachamim, everything written in the Torah, each and every one is critical, which perhaps is the most obvious misvara to all of us. The Torah said you need to do it, so obviously it's important. You have to send the slaves home, you have to send the fields back, and you have to blow shofar. But ask the Gemara, we learned that the word Yovel comes to say that something else is not necessary. Remember, we said it comes to include, it comes to exclude. So what is what? So according to the Chacham, there's no inclusion and exclusion. Everything is important. So what do we do? Answers the Gemara. Ahu, you know what that teaches me? The word Yovel, he that teach me, it includes even in Chutz La'aretz, there are dinim of Yovel. Yovel applies even outside Yovel. How can you tell me that? It says, Krasim Durar Ba'aretz. You make freedom in the land in Eretz Yisrael. Answers the Gemara. Hu bizman shenoyin dar ba'aretz, noyi b'chutz la'aretz. When there's freedom in Eretz Yisrael, when Yovel is noyi in Eretz Yisrael, then it's not. Then it applies to in outside Eretz. And that concludes the three different opinions with regard to the critical and necessary ingredient in order for Yovel to take effect. Opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, opinion of Rabbi Yosef, opinion of the Chachamim, whether you need all three, whether you just need the blowing of the shofar, and whether you need just the sending home of the servants. And now we get all the way back to our Mishnah. In the Mishnah we said, Ulanatiyah, and we'll conclude with this last few lines of Gemara, said in the Mishnah that the Rosh HaShanah of Tishrei is also for Natiyah, for saplings. And we learned the Mishnah a week ago. We read the Rashi. The Rashi says this is relevant for the lachas of Arla. Says the Gemara min Alan. Where do we know that with regard to Arla, that the fruit of a tree for the first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat, which of course is halacha, it still applies nowadays. One of the very important reasons why when it comes to fruits in Eretz Yisrael, you have to be careful, because potentially it could be Arla, okay? Generally, even any kashrus takes care of it, but if you're out in some random field and you just pick up an apple, who's to know? Who's to know? Maybe it's a brand new trees for 3 years, you cannot eat the produce, it's Arla. So where do we know that the Rosh HaShanah for Arla is Tishrei D'chsev, Shalei Shanim Arelim, for 3 years, it's going to be forbidden. Uksiv, and actually, it's not a straight read of the pasuk. We can take one moment, and the pasuk Shalshan Yelachem Arilim Lo Yachelu. That 3 years didn't be forbidden. And Muksiv, and the pasuk says B'Shana Ravius, and then it says in the 4th year V'Yalif, and this should sound familiar. Shana Mei Tishrei D'chsev Merish Shana, and therefore the word Shana means Tishrei. So Arla goes by Tishrei. Asking Marv Shana means maybe learn it from the Yisan. D'chsev Rishon Lechem L'Chad Shana. The same answer like we saw yesterday. Tanim Shanim Sheni Machadashim Mishanim Sheni Machadashim. We learned the word Shana for the word Shana, but it doesn't have the word Chaydash with it, whereas by Nisan by Nisan it says Chadshei Hashana, it says Chaydash and Shana, and therefore Arla is not equated, because by Arla it just says Shana, so we learn out from Tishrei. Tishrei is a new year for Arla. We'll pick it up in Mir Tashem from here tomorrow.